Florida State lands former Ole Miss offensive tackle Micah Pettus from the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. The Noles add another offensive lineman to the fold. It is Micah Pettus, massive, 6'7", 350 pounds, out of Ole Miss. He is originally from the state of Alabama, and it's a player that the Noles had recruited at the high school level. He'd made multiple visits to Tallahassee. So I'm going to break down his game overall, my thoughts about him, and we'll even talk about some pro football focused grades. This is a very important pickup for the Noles. And at the end, I'm even going to ask a few questions of you if you want to comment on YouTube. Let's start off with the grades here. Number one, this season for him, this is 2024 grades now. 765 snaps, 72.8 overall on his offensive grade, 74 for run blocking, 66.4 for pass protection. Gets a little grabby at times, but this is a very athletic guy, and he's 6'7", 350. He's played tight end. He has played in the backfield in his career. He's done all kinds of different things. Very unique player at Micah's size. But he also is a guy that can have a bad game against really twitchy guys on the edge. For instance, South Carolina, maybe as good a combination of pass rushers as the United States had this year, 48.4 overall, 50.1 in run blocking, 43.7 pass protection. They ate him up. So when I was talking to Stephen Willis on the early edition, the Monday show, it came out early on Monday about Pettus. He covers Ole Miss, and he said that Pettus would probably long-term be best served to play guard if he wants to move on to the National Football League. Maybe even, Florida State could do that. So it brings up an interesting point. Could Pettus play guard? Absolutely, especially considering Florida State has a need across the line. And they're going to run a lot of inside zone, a lot of power plays in different ways, quarterback draws, quarterback lead, quarterback power with Thomas Castellanos. I could see that. It depends on what other players the Noles get. But again, as I mentioned on the show on Monday, the second show, they need versatility. They've gotten burned by injuries in Tallahassee the last couple of years up front. It happens. But guys that didn't have familiarity with other spots ended up playing out of position, not as comfortable with the guy next to them, at least where they're lined up, things went awry. So if Pettus could play guard and tackle, that would be another good thing. On another note, looking at his pro football focus grades, he did have a good game against LSU. And I know they're not as good a defense as normal, but his pass protection grade in that game was 74.4. LSU still has some twitchy cats. Okay, they got some athletes. That's a pretty good grade. Overall, it was 70.8, 66.6 run blocking. Against LSU, that's nothing to sneeze at. And that's a rivalry game for Ole Miss playing against LSU. Now, what does this mean for Florida State? Here are a couple questions for you. Number one, how many guys do you want to take all together? That's something you got to think about. You got guys like Adrian Medley. You've got Hanson that's coming over from Vanderbilt. Medley's from UCF. I still say 5 or 6. That's an important thing to bring up. Secondarily, I think that even though you're kind of ahead of the curve here, you can't let up at all. Once some of these teams from the college football playoff are done and guys are entering the portal, Florida State needs to be ready to jump on a good tackle or two, especially if they have multiple years of eligibility. Now, Pettus, he might be your right tackle this next season, but that's probably going to be it. Hanson, probably the same thing. So they need another tackle that can play multiple years. Maybe he competes, for instance, with Pettus and plays a little bit, maybe plays some guard, and then he moves to Pettis' spot in 2026. They still have to do that. And they also have to look at it like 5 is the minimum number. If they can get 6, especially if 2 or 3 can play multiple years, that would be huge. Florida State is not in a position to do this every year. Getting 5 or more offensive linemen is really, really hard. Secondarily, now that you've gotten some bigger names out of the portal, You got Deuce Robinson. You got Pettus. You got Thomas Castellanos. You got some of these guys. Are you ready to make a move in to really go after a bunch of guys? You kept Jackson in the fold before he went to the NFL draft too, and you got Williams from Nebraska. Like, it's been a good year so far in the portal for the Noles. How much more are they going to go all in NIL money, effort? Because I don't see 2025 being a team that's going to compete for a national title, but you do at least want to get to a bowl game and be competitive. I'm curious to see what they do. I really am. How much are they really going to push the envelope at linebacker? They definitely need more help. They definitely need to find like one guy at least for the secondary, an experienced guy on the back end. You're not going to just replace Shaheem Brown, etc. Florida State has guys to replace. As Araya is leaving, you have to find some guys at different spots. And even with Deuce coming, you could probably go spend some money on another receiver. It's not easy, but Florida State's going to have to make those concessions somewhere. Which spots, how much, is it across the board? There's so many things about this that are interesting. But Pettus coming to Florida State also gives me hope, because I'm sure he had plenty of suitors. How many different teams were really interested in Micah Pettus? I do not know. But he had multiple visits, and he had a lot of people probably calling him and or his agent on a frequent basis. With that, I'm going to wrap up this Locked On Seminoles show. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. If you get a chance, hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe to this podcast. Rate and review if you download it on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube Music, wherever you go. And if you're going to the gym or something tomorrow, this is the best way to do it. I've got a bunch of podcasts, 1 to 2 pods every day of the week. Take them with you on the go and listen to Locked On Seminoles. Everybody have a good one. Take care.